Greetings, everyone. So let's just do a quick go round, refresh our memories who we are. I'm sure others are joining us. We've got a couple of main speakers today. So this is the World Intellectual Forum gathering. Nice to see everyone. I'm speaking from France, and you know me, I think, Thomas Stafford. I've been coordinating these meetings every month for the last, God knows, over a year now. And I believe that intellectuals matter. I think it's important that we take a stand for sanity, peace, science, how we define that, philosophy and the higher cultural values for humanity. I live in France, and intellectuals here are quite, respected. It's not a society driven by greed and corruption and all that, but one driven by the rule of law and, the Constitution. The French people take their idea of liberty, equality, and fraternity quite seriously. I think those are very important values: liberty, equality, and fraternity. I'm speaking from the middle of France, physically in the dead center, near a town called Boussac. And I've just had, for a month and a half, visiting a Syrian refugee from the war zone, which was Syria. She now retired and lives in Germany, escaped to Germany. I took her yesterday to see a statue of a local French intellectual called Pierre Leroux. I'll put his name in chat. Most people have never heard of him. He was mayor of my local town in 1848. When the French had a revolution, sort of continuing affirmation of the Republic. And he was one of the founders of socialism. But unlike Karl Marx, he wasn't a materialist. So he was an idealist, if you want. We know that he was interested in Buddhism, Pythagoras, Christianity, and even Freemasonry. He was an eclectic spiritual seeker and a socialist. And to me, that's a genuine intellectual. He grumbled at Marx. He knew Marx and said Marx is a dogmatic, one-size-fits-all materialist, and that's, not what we need. So I suspect Pierre Leroux was right, and that socialism took a wrong turning. So there's just one example of why intellectuals matter, and if we get our thinking right, if we get our analysis right, our philosophy right, it matters in the real world. And okay, so anyway, thank you. That's enough from me. I'll be chairing us. Let's go to Robert is going to be our main speaker, but do for the start. But do just introduce yourself, Robert, briefly this time.
In brief, I'm right now working on introducing the world to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights after recognizing the fact that it will be 73 years old this December, and the vast majority of people around the world have never heard of it, never read it, and didn't even know it existed. And my fear is that the subtextual reason that people have not been exposed to it is much more dangerous than we recognize, in the fact that when people know their inalienable rights, it makes governing a little bit more difficult. And government tries to make things easier for itself, even at the expense of the human rights of their citizens. And so there has been no real effort by governments to make people aware of what their inalienable rights are. And therefore, government has never performed at its optimum best, because it's never had to. It's never had to protect and defend the human rights of its citizens. It has always asked its citizens to compromise and sacrifice human rights for the security that government pretends to offer. So that is what I'm working on.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you, Robert. You're going to be our first keynote speaker. Those are really important ideas. And I know exactly what you're saying as a British citizen, just forcibly taken out of the European Union with all the rights that involved. Now the British state has decided, we don't want these rights. So yeah, I think we're going to have a very interesting talk shortly. Okay, Ian, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, certainly, Thomas. I'm a university scholar at the University of Divinity in Melbourne. My strongest interest is in interfaith relations, and I've chaired for many years the Interfaith Commission of the Victorian Council of Churches, and I established or co-established the Jewish Christian Muslim Conference of Australia, and so I'm heavily involved at that end. And of course, that involves working in peace relations as well. One can't be in one without the other. So,
right. And you've been a founding member of the World Intellectual Forum. We'll just throw that in. So welcome, Ian. Nice to see you. Sean, do introduce yourself.
Yes. Good day, everyone, and thank you, Thomas, for organising the meeting again. My name is Sean English, and I'm based here in Ireland, and I've been working with Thomas for quite a number of years in various areas, mostly in peace studies, and I've been teaching a peace studies course and developing peace studies programs at various colleges. I've been fairly active in the International Peace Research Association when that was much more active than it is today. And my main area there was the Commission on Peace Theories, the theory of peace. And that's the sort of work I'm still involved in. So I'm delighted to hear about the Universal Declaration. I know we did have it in our schools when I was young. I think we did have, the Irish government did insist at one stage that every school had a copy of the Declaration, the Universal Declaration, but I don't think it's still there now on the walls of the schools, but it was there at one stage. And just, Thomas, I'm really looking forward to getting back. I was in the centre there in France three years ago, so I'm looking forward to trying to get back there at some, because it's a lovely, and I didn't really see much of the countryside around, so I'm looking forward to that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, no, you're welcome back, Sean. Anyone is welcome to visit. It's a kind of retreat peace centre. So, Dr. Mishra, would you like to introduce yourself? Well, this is just our introductions before we do our main talks.
It happens on every month.
Dr. Mishra, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, that's it.
Yes.
Go for it. Yeah.
Please.
Would you like to introduce yourself briefly, just for those that don't know you yet?
Well, I think the most important point that we should be discussing today is about the peace and the how to reduce violence in the world. And this is a problem that perhaps we should be more seriously taking up at intellectual level. In my opinion, the violence in the world is increasing, despite the fact that we wish other way. And this trend of violence may be taking over the power or taking over the property or expansion of the territory. All this is adding to more and more violence. And my fear now is that perhaps violence should not become an example for governing the countries. I'm afraid that there may be a tendency among people to take over power through violent means and stay on. And the whole world will remain watching that situation and only crying that this is no good. What to do? How to tackle it? My feeling is that the international community is not very active for the fear of politics, that I will lose a group or I will be branded another way. And therefore, there is no serious tackling of the violence in world, wherever there is a violence.
Okay.
To me,
well, that's a huge topic. Thank you, Dr. Mishra.
Yeah.
I think we'll
Okay.
address that shortly, and I think you're going to be sharing some thoughts on Gandhi, and the environment and so on. So I look forward to your remarks a bit later. Thank you.
Okay.
So that's great. Now, Dr. Aaron Sikawa, are you able to introduce yourself? For those that haven't met you, greetings.
Hello.
Ah, there you are. Hello.
Yes. Hello. Hi. I am Dr. Arun Sekarwar. I'm assistant professor in the Alvag University, Agra. And I teach neurobiology, and I enjoy my research also through my PhD scholars in the neurosciences. The topic of peace is very pertinent today because 2nd October is the birthday of the father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who was the epitome of the peace. In my opinion, the peace, there are two kinds, just like the light is having a dual nature of, the particles. So the same way I feel duality in the politicians. Just recently in the United Nations General Assembly, people were talking about peace, peace, peace. But at the background, the same people are busy in upgrading their arsenal, selling out their weapons. And some people are even, loving and praising like Taliban kind of issue. So there's a duality in the politician. I would recommend that in the course curriculum and teaching and in our education system everywhere in the world, starting from the elementary education, we should start inculcating the science of neuroscience or peace. Because it is not the DNA in us that decides the peace and harmony or the crime nature. It is a mindset. That mindset, if gets abrupted or mindset is deviated, that time somebody becomes orthodox and then non-peace things happen. I mean, terrorism do happen. So this mindset should be taught in slowly. So I know like primary subjects are okay, but why not we should inculcate the message of brain and mind from the childhood start onwards, so that they should understand the science of peace. And also one important thing, the countries have lot of budgets for the weapons, like it could be in the trillions of dollar, billions and dollar. I vouch that if they just spend even 1% of that money in the mind and brain education, or brain and mind, meditation and this piece of education, that even 1% will be enough to bring the enough peace that we cannot even sustain by upgrading our missiles and aeroplanes and upgrading a lot of, arms in the world. So
Sure.
this is like message I want to inculcate here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your contribution. And Aaron has spoken before to this forum about the neurology of peace, and it's an important theme that we've had. So hopefully, maybe later you can share some more thoughts on that.
Sure.
And the neurobiology of conflict, aggression, violence is a theme we've touched on several times. It's important. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Let's go to Agila. Can you hear me from Israel? I believe you're speaking from Israel.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Do introduce yourself and say hello,
Okay.
and how are you and all that. Yeah.
So hello everybody. New places.
We can't see you,
I've
but
been
we can hear you.
working. You can't see me?
No, the camera doesn't seem to be on, but we can hear your voice. That's fine.
Okay. So I've been working with Thomas for the last 21 years, I would say, in spiritual teachings and trying to achieve peace and harmony in this world. So I can't say that I feel that we've made a lot of progress. Maybe Thomas feels in a different way. But where I live in Israel, I'm sure that all of you or most of you are aware that we are surrounded by hostile countries, I would say, or with hostile politics, some of them real terrorists. And things are not getting any better. That's unfortunately. So there is a theory. Theory is nice, but there are a lot, I don't know if to say people, but leaders and faith leaders and others as well that are working basically against peace. So when you have many people working against it and weaponizing and actually teaching war teachings, it's very difficult to achieve peace. So I'm sorry, but this is my state of mind. I would have liked to say other things, but this is my state of mind lately.
No, thanks, Gila. You always add a touch of realism to our discussions. I would just say that I've just hosted, I think before you joined the conference, a visit from a Syrian refugee who's a Christian Syrian girl who's a victim of conflict in her country. You know, and she was doing immense volunteer work here, and she has done previously, and she worked with a Jesuit father in Syria who worked for peace and human rights and universally, you know. So I'm sure there are many, many good people in the countries neighboring Israel that are working for peace. And so, you know, it's a really complex thing how we can, I think the Bible says, sort the sheep from the goats. You know, there are good people in every country, every culture, every city working for peace. And then there are some people who are, as you say, working for a militarism and you know, violence. So that's one of the things that our peace work has to acknowledge as fact. Yeah. Shreya, can you hear us? I know she's having problems with her microphone. Shreya is joining us from India. This is a chance to introduce yourself, Shreya, or put a little message in chat if you can't. I think Shreya might be having trouble with joining us, but she can hear us, I believe. So let me introduce Trey Shankar is studying law. She has a degree in forensic psychology. So, you know, relevant to our first speaker today about human rights law. She'll be very interested to hear your talk, Robert. And she's also very much interested in peace studies and, you know, education, what we can do to make a difference. So anyway, I hope she can hear us. Right, well, look, thank you everyone for introducing yourself. Robert, it's over to you now. We're pleased you've joined us. I think you're in New York, are you?
I'm actually in Florida.
Oh, right, okay.
But
Florida.
Still in the United States.
I guess it's warmer there, so that's good. Okay, over to you. I believe you're going to tell us your views on human rights and education, what we can do, etc. Thank you.
Well, let me just give a quick background. I run the organization that encouraged the United Nations to execute the UN Decade on Human Rights Education and then the UN Year on Human Rights Learning. One thing that we learned from the Decade of Education was that it isn't about education, it is about integration, and lifelong learning is the best way of integrating something into the way people think and their DNA. And so human rights isn't necessarily something that should be part of an education process, but part of a lifelong learning process. And one reason for that is that if you read the Declaration and its 13 articles as a child, you understand the meanings from the perspective of a child. But by the time you reach your 20s or 50s or 70s, you look at those same words and they mean something completely and totally different. And it's important to have all those aspects in your life and in the life of those around you. Human rights, well, the Declaration of Human Rights, as you all know, was adopted by the United Nations on December 10th, 1948, as a response to the Second World War and specifically the Holocaust. None of the ideas necessarily by themselves were unique or new. It was the first time all of those ideas were compiled into one document, and one document where women were treated equally as men, the first time that was done in history on a global scale, certainly, and in most cases on any scale, because most places in 1948 and many places even today do not treat women equally with men. So it was a very unique document then. It is a unique document now. And what is troubling is that if that same document, which was unanimously adopted by the United Nations in 1948, were proposed today, it probably would not pass the General Assembly. So it is not a surprise that countries around the world do not promote it, do not educate their populations, and even with the UN Decade of Human Rights that took place from 1995 to 2004, very few did what was asked of them, even though they voted unanimously to adopt the decade. Another thing that was interesting is after the decade, the UN General Assembly decided never to have another UN decade of anything. So I think that that says a lot for what we learned about education and human rights over that 10-year period. Subsequent to the decade and subsequent to the year of human rights learning, we developed what are called human rights cities, which is using the word city as a geographic term, not necessarily as a city, where human rights is integrated into the framework of a geographic area, bringing together all the various NGOs, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, educational institutions to form an assembly and introduce human rights into the community. Now, human rights as a word or as a phrase means very little, but the intention in 1948 and our intention even today is the understanding that the language, the framework, the foundation that we get from the Universal Declaration is the catapulting us, the language that we need for human beings to live in a society, a civil society, even with people they disagree with vehemently. It gives us a shared language, a shared purpose, and a shared way of being that doesn't exist outside its framework. And so I hear all of you talking about peace, and it's interesting because I had gone to a meeting with Secretary of State Colin Powell's chief of staff, who not only was his chief of staff when he was Secretary of State, but was also his chief of staff when he was the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon. And I asked him what he thought was the most serious threat facing the United States of America. And he said, without any hesitation, that it was disenfranchised youth. And that was because they had nothing to fear and nothing other to gain than to be outrageous and to take chances and to do the unimaginable in the face of having no future. And I asked him if he had read or knew the Declaration, and he said no. And that was terribly surprising to me, that the Chief of Staff of the Secretary of State of the United States of America had not ever read the Universal Declaration, and I was not even sure at that point if he had even heard of it. And I had the short version with me, and we went through it quickly, and he said, well, I see one problem. And I said, and what's that? He said, it would cost a fraction of the dollars spent globally to institute this than what we spend on weapon systems, police forces, and military. And no government and no corporate enterprise will ever entertain the idea of spending so little money to accomplish so much at their own peril and their own lack of survival. So he said, so the big challenge here is to get anybody to agree that this is an option. And so subsequent to that, my goal and the goal of the organizations that I've worked with and for and have headed has been to try and make that a reality. And even at the most local levels, the pushback is tremendously great. But the only way I think that we end up getting to peace is by the integration of the Declaration of Human Rights into every fabric of our lives, because it is the language where words mean the same thing. And my example to you today is when you're young and you understand the word safety, and it very often comes from don't touch the hot stove, don't put your hand up there because it's hot. And you understand that as basic safety. But as you get older, if you ask a police officer or a soldier, what is safety? They give you one set of definitions. But if you ask the mother of in the United States, for example, if you ask a Black mother who has teenage boys, what's the different definition of safety? She will tell you something completely different. If you ask a woman, what is the definition of safety versus a man's definition of safety in most parts of the world, you will get a different definition. And if a word as simple as safety is one we cannot agree on, then we continue talking at each other and not to each other. And you will not have peace, and you will not have a forward-moving society until we can talk to each other where words mean the same thing so we can understand each other. And so at this point, we are launching a number of initiatives. One is the anniversary of the 75th of the Declaration, which will take place on December 10th, 2023. We are starting as many activities and actions as we possibly can. We are asking for institutions, organizations that have outreach to sign on and join the celebrations with us, whether they do it locally, globally, or nationally within their own frameworks. We have lots of materials, and the materials are growing on a daily basis. On November 10th, we launch Human Rights Every Day, which is our plan to post one article every day from November 10th to December 10th with a visual to go with it, so that people who don't necessarily read very well at least can see through a photograph or some kind of artistic endeavor what those words mean. So every day for 30 days on all social media, on websites and newsletters, what have you. The idea is to try and by December 10th, 2023, to reach 1 billion people and then kick off the ultimate plan, which is the 100th anniversary of the UDHR on December 10th, 2048, where we hope to hit all 8+ or 9 or 10 billion people by that time, having access to and understanding and having the ability to claim their inalienable rights as their own. Because only then will we get to a point where people will tell government that government's responsibility is to represent our needs and protect our human rights, not have us sacrifice them in order for government to function more easily. And I think that we also have to get away from the misnomer that we are electing leaders. We are, at least in the democracies, and there are certainly fewer of them than there were even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that we are electing representatives. And a representative is someone who carries your message to a forum that then passes legislation and proposes legislation and puts into places changes in society. But as long as we continue to elect leaders, those people believe that they do not necessarily represent us, but represent their own positions, and their own positions change the longer they are in power, to preserving their power base rather than preserving what is right about the society that they have chosen to represent. So we should substitute the word leader for representative, and therefore start to change the semantics, which changes the mindset, which changes the way we perceive people in elective office. Nobody here is electing God. Nobody here is electing the Messiah. Nobody here is electing the leader of a movement. We are electing representatives. And if we don't understand that, then we don't understand the whole purpose of government. And if we don't understand the purpose of government, it is no wonder that in so many parts of the world, there are cameras watching us every moment of every day. There is no reason that we should not understand why there are computers that collect all the data of everything that we do, every place we go. That is to make it easier for a police state to operate. It is not to make it easier for humans to exercise human rights, their inalienable rights. And so the mindset, the way we think, the words that we use become ever so important because they convey a sense of who we are and where we want to go and what our expectations are for the world today and tomorrow. The other point of this is that democracy is the best way to institute and integrate human rights. As democracies fall, human rights becomes less and less possible, as does peace. Because dictators are not there for peace. Dictators will do things to maintain their power. And one way of maintaining power in a dictatorship or a strongman situation is to make others the enemy. Because you rally your public when they think that there's an outside enemy. And we see Putin doing it, we see China doing it, we see Turkey doing it. We see all of these nations falling into the same step. Brazil, Venezuela, everybody on the outside is the enemy. Even people on the inside can be the enemy. But that is the way you rally your supporters and show that you are the victim, that they are victims, and only you as the strong man can save them. The language is important. The direction is important. And I hope that all of you will consider, starting on November 10th, posting one article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have the short version, which makes it much easier to post. You can feel free to copy anything that we do. We'll post the day before so people can then use that the next day on their own materials. But it is important that people know them, because if you don't know them, you can't claim them. If you can't claim them, you can't integrate them. And if we don't integrate them, we will continue down this pathway that is foreboding, because democracy, even in the United States, holds by merely a thread. And my guess is that when and if democracy fails globally, then environmentalism, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, education as we know it, healthcare as we know it, will all fall by the wayside, because that is not the objective of dictators. That is not the objective of fascist regimes. That is not the objective of strongmen. These people have abrogated all of those social mores that we hold dear, that we think are important to the quality of life. And they will continue to do so because it serves their needs, not the needs of the people that they were originally, in most of these countries, elected to serve. With the exception of China, most of the leaders now of strongmen states, strongmen dominated states, were elected. They then changed the law in order to protect their own power. And by using fear, they have been able to do that. And in an environment where fear rules, peace and human rights are lost byproducts of a failed regime. So I'm going to just open it to questions or discussion, because I think that it's more important to talk about these things and share values than it is for me to lecture.
Thank you so much, Robert, for those remarks. Very insightful and bring lots of points for discussion. My first question to you is just clarification. Tell us what the name of the organization is, and can you put the website of where we can get this material in the chat so that we can learn this?
Well, the organization originally was PDHRE, People's Decade of Human Rights Education. That became just a moniker, and we changed it from education to learning. The woman who founded the organization, I came up with the idea of the UN Decade of Human Rights Education. The woman who started the organization, Shulamit Koenig, was the person who founded PDHRE, and she got the UN Human Rights Prize for her work in getting the decade established. The website for PDHRE, which is pdhre.org, is not really a functional website. It's more of a library kind of thing than an actual website. So we use Facebook, and I will put the link to the Facebook page where that stuff will be listed. And that I'll do momentarily. And that will have all the information for the stuff that I've been talking about, okay. The programs that we're doing.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Robert. I guess just a couple of general comments on your excellent talk. Obviously, I share the sentiments a great deal. When I taught at the University of London in peace studies, we set up a course training teachers at the Institute of the Institute of Education. And there were about 6 people that all contributed to the course. They were all professors and experts in aspects of education. And one of the speakers was one of Britain's leading experts on human rights education. Back in the 90s, we're talking. I think she was called Margaret Reynolds. Margaret Rendell, R-E-N-D-E-L. And she contributed to this was a teacher training program looking at conflict in the classroom, but in the wider world. And she has published lots of work on human rights education. So that made me first aware as an educator, there was such a thing as human rights education in a detailed academic sense. She was an amazing woman, and one of Britain's leading advocates for that field. And I think it is, and I realize, this is really an important part of peace studies, actually. And then I read recently the biography of Eleanor Roosevelt, who actually was the genius that managed to get this through the UN. She became the first leader of this, the Organization of Human Rights at the UN. And she was an amazing woman. Eleanor Roosevelt belongs to an earlier generation of women political activists. So I'm sure you remember her work somewhere in your homage. And the other thing,
I actually travel around with casts of her shoes in my car, so I am never far from Eleanor Roosevelt.
Okay. The other thing I would say is that before I moved to Scotland, I lived in Sussex near a place called Midhurst, which is where H.G. Wells used to teach in the grammar school. And I ran my institute for a couple of years from a manor house in Sussex. And I'd always read that H.G. Wells had a hand in writing the first draft of the Universal Declaration. He was a polymath, a philosopher, a futurist, a scientist, graduate of the University of London like me. So my question is, did you know about that? And what do you think of H.G. Wells? I mean, how big was his contribution?
There's no documentation to that effect that I'm aware of. There was a committee of delegates to the United Nations chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt. who drafted the document. The document did come with feedback from around the world because none of the ideas were new. They were found in religions, they were found in the Napoleonic Code, they were found in the US Declaration of Independence and the Magna Carta and all of these documents that go back, the Enlightenment, go back way back in time. But this is the first time they were codified as a universal declaration of human rights. And so it is possible that Wells would have had an opportunity to comment, but at the beginning, the United Nations was based in the United States, not even in New York in the very early years. And so it is unlikely that he was there. So I would not know if he had any direct impact on the final document.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll do some research and get back to next month about that. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Our colleague has made lots of interesting observations. Sean, did you have a reflection to add?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to the idea that Robert said. If that document was being drawn up today, you don't think it would pass the United Nations? What parts would you think? It's just a general idea that most of the principles wouldn't pass today with China, with Russia, with who? Is that what you mean, that it wouldn't pass today? Because some of the basic principles are found in all cultures. That's just my question.
Well, it's ironic that even some countries have reformed their constitutions to reflect the Declaration of Human Rights, or in an aspect or not, or one or the other. But even in the United States, when the Declaration first came out, the United States didn't agree, even though the United States to some extent spearheaded it, with some of the elements on economics. You know, everybody should be able to work, everybody should be able to do this. So there were two covenants that were drawn up. One that was signed onto by the Soviet Union at the time, and one that was signed up by the United States. And it divided the declaration almost into two, one with the social and cultural aspects and one with the economic aspects. And neither side has ever really addressed why they left the other side out. But we do understand the Soviet Union and ultimately China do not agree on the political and social aspects, and they do agree on the cultural and economic aspects. And that has continued. But I'll give you another example. We worked very closely with the African Union and their representatives at the United Nations in all the work that we've done. And often they would bring the stuff up and propose it. And that was one way we got a number of things passed in General Assembly. But I was having lunch with an African ambassador who serves on the third committee, which is the Human Rights Committee at the UN. And he said, you know, it's time the West stops telling us that we should not beat our wives, because our wives understand that when we beat them, we are showing love. And I said, I find it very difficult to accept that anybody with a healthy mindset wants to be physically abused. I just can't imagine that would indicate to them that they are being loved. Hitting them and beating them, and in some cases killing them. And then I said, oh, but wait a second. I think that maybe you're right, because if I'm not mistaken, 150 years ago, 140 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago, Black slaves knew that their masters loved them when they beat them. And so you're probably right that people do understand love and beating as the same. And he stood up and he said, you know, that's not the same. And I said, it damn well is. Your wives don't want to be beaten and slaves didn't want to be beaten. And he stormed out. His aide stayed, and his aide said, send me all the information that you have. I will look into it and we will do what we can on these issues. And then the ambassador came back in, shook my hand, and then left. So he still wanted to be a gentleman in that lunch, but could not accept the fact that he might be wrong. But later in that same year, he voted to approve funding for battered women's shelters being part of the women's movement promoted by the United Nations and the creation of the entire division that's focused on women. So I think that it did have an impact, at least on some level, but it was shocking to me that someone serving on the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations would see such a difference between the treatment of men and women.
Well, thank you for that interesting thing. That leads to another comment I was going to make, and we've sort of entered that territory. As a philosopher, I've got into the whole question of the evolution of human rights thinking. Obviously, part of our training at the University of London was to read John Locke and the whole idea of individual human rights, political rights, which underlay the modern experiment in political democracy that you rightly talk about, which led to the birth of the USA and so on. The thing is that I also am aware that different cultures and different political traditions have different concepts of human rights. And so the left, the Marxist tradition, was much more about collective rights, social rights, the right to work, the right to free nursery places. You know, in the Soviet tradition, rights, I mean, they used to mock the individualism of capitalism because it's rich. The rich have rights, the poor have no rights in capitalism. That was their argument, and still is to some extent. I imagine that's being articulated by China to some extent, by others. And then in Islam, again, they have their own formulation of concepts of rights and duties. In Islamic legal systems, which depend on their theology, whether Shia or Sunni or from whichever brand, you know, individual humans our rights are underwritten by a sort of cosmic order, which is ultimately a spiritual order. And that's the same in Christianity. We, in great Christian thinkers, we have rights because God gave us those rights. And, you know, and in Hinduism, again, yes, people have rights, of course we do. And in fact, the word dharma is core to the Hindu way of life. But it's you know, kings have a dharmic duty. We all have a right according to our station in life, our portion of dharma, which is governed partly by karma. So if you bring in reincarnation theory, it gets very complicated. So really my question, and then I could go on, you know, in Judaism, again, law is central to the Jewish concept of God. God is a giver of laws. Therefore, legality, you know, is central to the whole Jewish mission. Yet there's an ambivalence in parts of the Bible. It seems like only, you know, certain kinds of people come under the covenant, and then other certain types of people are not part of the covenant, you know, and do they have rights? So there are ambiguities in all the traditions. So my question is, and I wonder if you do this as an organization, acknowledging that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, its language, came out of a particular thought world, largely Western thought world. Now we've got a much more multipolar, multicultural world in which, you know, indigenous voices, traditional religions have revived. Should there not be an attempt to try and re-articulate the ideas of universal human rights in the cultural language that other civilizations and cultures are used to, so that we don't play this game of, oh, well, it's just Western imperialism imposing its capitalist hegemony using human rights speak, and really all they want to do is bomb us. I mean, that's what the Iranians are going to be saying, isn't it? So I think it's important we address this problem of cultural particularism versus, you know, what is the universal within the universalism, I think, is my question, Robert.
Okay, as I said earlier on, the raison d'etre of human rights and the Declaration is to provide a language so that people can live in complex societies, even with people they vehemently disagree with. That's the part that's universal. That's the element that's universal, because that's in every society. Once you get beyond the nuclear family, you need structures in order to survive and prosper as a society. So civil society, being civil, is what human rights is about, and that is universal, regardless of what the 30 articles say in terms of our responsibilities and the responsibilities of government. In addition to that, the very fundamental understanding of human rights is where your rights begin and end. And my rights are not infinite. My right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to work, freedom to have leisure, all end when they have a negative impact on my neighbor. So the moment that my rights intrude on someone else's rights, as it basically says in Article 30, that's where my rights end. I do not have the right to step on your toes. I do not have the right to punch you in the nose. I do not have the right to disturb your property if you own property. I do not have the right to take what is yours and not mine. That too is universal. So yes, in a society where things are shared, that may be different, but that is something that you are accustomed to in your understanding of those words. And that's why I said it's a lifelong learning process, because as you read them with the experiences that you have and in the culture that you come from, you understand those words maybe slightly differently, but the words are pretty much the same. And I think that that's what we've seen from presenting around the world. I mean, I've done this in Africa, I've done this in Asia, I've done this in the Americas, and the negative feedback, which you said, is that this is potentially Western imperialism, doesn't hold water when you start to look at the lessons and the children's stories and the songs that children learn around the world, where they still talk about humanity and being together and being helpful and being brothers and sisters and the like. And those things go back to the beginning of time. There are very few little girls that can ever remember their fathers telling them that they should not look to the future as a possibility of brightness. Little girls are their father's princesses, regardless, in most cases, of the society. It's only when they're not little girls anymore that that begins to change. And the same thing as boys. Little boys are often the princes in their families until they're not little boys and they're expected to go to work or not go to school or lose some of those things. And those are the sacrifices that we're asked to make because we do not claim human rights as our own. But claiming human rights as our own is the stepping stone to living in community and to living in a just community, because rules, regulations, laws should be to protect and defend human rights, and human rights is the framework for how we live in an integrated, fully realized society.
Well, thanks. I like that formulation about human rights are important because they enable us to live in a society, in a civil society, even with people we disagree with. I think that's the hallmark of a mature society. And yes, humanity is still very far from it. Okay, so any other points? Who would like to comment? Gila, would you like to add some observations from Israel perspective? I hope you are still with us. Maybe she's gone briefly from her office. Okay.
Thomas, I
Yes,
wonder,
Dr. Mishra. Yeah.
I have a problem with the universalization of humanism that we are facing today. We talk a lot about human rights, we talk about human considerations, but in practice it is not happening. In practice it is being ignored. Wherever there is a problem of humanism, we ignore it, and whole world watches it without any action. This could be a worry in future, that there could be a tendency of this human rights issue being ignored completely, and people will get to thinking that even after ignoring, we can sustain, we can live, we can prosper. That should be some way checked, and I wonder what can be done, if anyone has comment about it.
Well, let me just say that when the MDGs were proposed at the United Nations, our organization fought with the Secretary General's office and with members of the General Assembly that they left human rights out. And part of the reason for that was the UN is based on 3 pillars: security, development, and human rights. And we argued aggressively that in reality, the United Nations is built on 2 pillars and a foundation. The foundation has to be human rights, and then you can have security and development as your pillars. But security and development not based on a human rights framework and not based on a foundation of human rights is not sustainable. And if you look at the SDGs, which succeeded the MDGs, human rights is better integrated into each and every aspect of those proposed ideals. And that was us fighting with the bureaucracy of the United Nations to make that a reality. But I agree with you. The goal of governments, even with the SDGs in place, even with many other organizations around the world talking, they have no form of action. And one reason for the lack of teeth in human rights legislation and human rights proposals is that governments are out to protect themselves and their own powers from the people that they are elected to serve. And that is why I said we have to stop calling them leaders and call them representatives. And it is also why it is imperative that every human being on the planet gets exposed to the Declaration and their inalienable rights, whether given by God or nature. They are not given by man, they are not given by government, and they should not be able to be taken by man or government. But the only way that they will not be is if people know them and claim them as their own. And one quick story, I was in a meeting in Egypt during the Arab Spring, and it was a UN-sponsored meeting. And one of the presenters was a journalist from Turkey. And she said, one of the big problems we have in Turkey is that Ataturk declared that all women are equal with men. And that was a wonderful thing, but he gave us those rights. We didn't claim them. And now we have a different leader, and he has decided that those rights that were given by government can be taken by government. And now we are no longer equal, because government presented and government withdrew. And now if women in Turkey or anywhere else in the world want to have human rights, they will have to know them and claim them as their own. And that's where we are in the world at large, where men and women are sacrificing human rights for survival. And that is not the way it should be, but it won't change until we know them and claim them as our own.
I have another question for you, Robert. Thanks for that. I know quite a few people that want to add the right to peace as part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's not in the wording as yet, I don't think. Can you comment on this idea? Should peace be a human right, or do you think it's their implication, or what? Or is it something to add in?
It is actually, number 3, everyone has the human right to live life, liberty, and security. I'm trying to remember the exact, the word peace is not there,
No,
but every single other aspect of what peace is there in the 30 articles. And I think that part of the reason that it was left out is because if all 30 articles are realized and recognized, you have peace. So peace is the outcome of the full integration of universal human rights globally. You don't have peace. Peace in and of itself takes on a very different meaning if peace is one of 30 articles, when it is actually the outcome of all 30 articles. You run the danger of people saying, well, we're not at war, so we're at peace, we have peace. But that's not necessarily what peace is. As long as there's still violence in jails and violence in prisons, and people can be subjectively or subjectively arrested or being forced to sacrifice their human rights, that's not living in a peaceful world. So if peace is the culmination of the full integration of all 30 articles, making it an article cheapens what peace is, and also changes the definition of what a global peaceful world would look like.
Okay, well, I think there's a discussion to be had there. And I know there are quite a few people, activists, who want it to be added. And they would say contra that. They'd say, we love you, Robert, you're great, but actually, no, we need to articulate this as a specific right. I'm not taking sides on this argument.
No, and I appreciate that, but it is not a specific right. It is the culmination of all rights.
Yeah.
Because
okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I love the rhetoric, but I'm not convinced by the argument, because I think peace actually is and ought to be focused and realized as a, as a right in itself. I mean, but so another question, whilst anyone else, and then we're going to go on to our next keynote speaker today. Shirin Kulkarni is joining us for the second half. She's going to be talking about creativity, a slightly different tone, maybe the creative way we can get a sense of peace. And she's been working on this for many years. Before we shift, I've got another question for Robert, which is, I'm also in touch with lots of people that stress eco rights. There's a move now to not just human rights, but all of nature. Rivers, even in New Zealand law, now have rights. Indigenous people say trees should have rights. Does the environment have rights? And how do you fit that into your work as a propagandist for human rights education? Do animals and trees and rivers, where do they fit within your mental map, so to say?
They are absolutely integral, because the idea of human rights is to create an environment that humans can live in. And we know that natural diversity is an essential part to a healthy environment. And the greater that diversity, the healthier the planet is. The healthier the planet is, the healthier the people that live in it are. So environmentalism is 100% part of human rights. We, for whatever reason, were designated the apex of the hierarchy because of the way we developed in nature. And the more that we eliminate, like I think just recently they announced 12 more species or 20 more species are fully extinct, that jeopardizes our own survivability on the planet. And that is completely antithetical to human rights. So preserving the planet, saving the trees, understanding how nature works and our role in it is 100% what the Declaration is all about. It can't be about humans exclusively, because then there will be no world in which humans can live in. So it is whether there needs to be another document or not, I think that it is clearly the foundation that this document is based on.
Right, right. Thank you.
Oh.
Yes, Dr. Mishra. Yeah.
Yeah. This is again a little bit the point. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Robert, you can hear me? Okay. Some years ago, I had a scientist come over to my laboratory from Vietnam. And he was a young scientist, but very critical of issues and very sharp thinker. In my discussion, he told me one thing, and that I would like to share with you, that how environment is important. He told me that the violence itself is not that dangerous as the fear of occurring violence. And he was telling me that my science suffers because I am not sure how many more minutes I can devote to science. Next moment, there will be knock at my door and I will be in prison. That kind of situation. So the environment issue, what kind of life people should live? Should it be life, it should be full of fear? Should it be life, it should be fear of suspicion? Should it be life, it should be more talking about uncertainties? What humans should do to ensure that this common issue of the world somewhere improves?
Gosh.
A foundational element to the creation of the Declaration was when Franklin Delano Roosevelt said in one of his more famous speeches, the world should be without fear and without want. And he understood very well that fear is one of the most dangerous motivators out there. And it is how someone like Donald Trump became president of the United States, by creating fear. It is how Bolsonaro became head of Brazil, by creating fear. In the Philippines, fear. In Turkey, fear. And in Putin, fear. China, fear. So you are absolutely right. Unless we find the ways to overcome and limit fear as a tactic, we will always be in jeopardy. The Nazis' biggest way to power was to silence the enemies by creating fear that you would be next, even if you were next. And that famous comment by that priest who said, when they came for the communists, I said nothing. And when they came for the Jews, I said nothing. And when they came for the priests, I said nothing. And when they came for me, there was no one there to say anything. I mean, I paraphrased, but the point is the same. But as long as we say nothing, as long as we don't stand up to fear, then fear will rule us. And so you're absolutely right. It is the number one problem in the world today, and demagogues use it to their advantage, and they do very well. And with social media, it's a bigger problem than it ever was in history.
Okay.
Robert, thank you both. Yes, and this is where, if we had time, maybe next month, Aaron can talk to us about the neuroscience of fear, because fear is it can be studied, how it's created. We can learn how to diminish it.
Can I add a point?
Yeah, go for
As
it,
far as my view, as far as my view is concerned, fear is very necessary. Fear is the like it's a thrust that human do, inventions and discoveries. If there's no fear, if there's no demand, and we feel satiated in one situation, then human sociology and human evolution would not be that proper. I know these two terms are very important nowadays, peace and fear. And we live somewhere in between. So we expect peace theoretically, but in practicality, we are under the fear, okay? That is my notion. So we are residing somewhere in this Likert scale of fear and peace somewhere. Now, fear is necessary also for the human development, and without this fear, probably we would have not come up to this stage of Homo sapiens, human civilization. But we have to define exactly what is peace, how much is necessary, and how much fear is also necessary. Like I could know recently that there is no proper definition of terrorism in the United States. Okay, I mean people define it in a own perspective as per their own geography. Like I can say like this terrorism and is having different meaning in Afghanistan now when Taliban is there, and it has different meaning when it comes to some other country. So we have to define, and human civilization is very much important to have both elements, peace and fear also. So we should have a balance of it. And next month I will try to come back with my presentation, Professor Thomas. Thank you.
Just one thing on that, there is a difference between the fear that launched creativity and discovery and fear used as a political tool to beat people down. They're not exactly the same.
Sure.
Running away from a saber-toothed tiger is not the same thing as creating enemies of your neighbor in order to gain political power.
Good point. Thank you, Robert. Okay, so look, let's draw a line under this part of the meeting. It's been a fascinating discussion. I think Aaron just gave us a new explanation for why the Bible says, in the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I've always wondered about that phrase. Now I think I understand it. Let's move on to our next speaker. Shirin Kulkarni is joining us from Finland. We met recently at a conference organized by Rotary International on peace. Shirin was a speaker there, and I was impressed by her talk on creativity. So I've invited her to join us. And perhaps you could begin by introducing yourself, Shirin, to the group, and then we're going to hear your talk with great interest. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Thomas, and namaste to all. And now this has become a new normal because we don't shake hands anymore. So I'm very glad to be here with you all on this beautiful evening. And greetings from Tampere, Finland. And myself, a researcher and a founder for Council for Creative Education. And I've been doing my research in the field of creativity for last more than 20 plus years, and trying to explore it as much as possible in various fields, including the education and also as a life skill. So today's evening, I will share a bit about my thoughts for reaching peace through creativity. So like how it can be done. So I have done some small research on that and would like to present it in front of you. And my other interests are also into like philosophy, Indology, and I'm also currently working as a religion teacher in a school in Tampere. So that's something to add to my CV, because then it makes me actually understand that what the kids are thinking about the religion, the worldview, and also about these other things like war and peace and symbolism and all other kinds of things that we like to discuss upon. So I think I'm at a right place at right moment, discussing with the first graders to ninth graders and then to you all learned people. So today is my like a very good day for me. So with all your permission, I would like to start my presentation. Please feel free to stop me in between and ask the questions, or if you want to put it for the end, then we can do it later also.
Yeah.
So I think I can share my screen now.
Yeah, I've enabled that.
Yeah, I got it. So great. So here is my topic, reaching peace through creativity. And this is like my organization's website. You can see it there. And this is my email address if you want to reach me later. This is very actually fascinating. Like whenever I think about creativity, it always kind of give me a new perspective of, how and where it can be used, and what are the different dimensions we can look at when we explore this amazing thing called creativity. As we all know that we often talk about these 21st century skills, and then there are these 4 C's, like collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. So I often think about creativity as a means of, imbibing all these other 3 C's into it. So let's see how we can do it, like for the peace. So these are my points for discussion today. Creativity as a therapy, and why do we lose our internal peace at the first place, and how does creativity helps in regaining it, individual creativity for internal peace, and collective creativity, and benefits of collective creativity, nurturing creativity as a life skill. So that's kind of the crux of the story, I would say. So first we will talk about like creativity as a therapy, because I hope that we all understand that creativity has a therapeutic value. So why? Because it kind of heals people from within, because they can express themselves through various mediums. And some forms of creative therapies I have written there, like art therapy, dance therapy, music therapy. So this is like the picture is telling you that there is a soldier and who is trying to express himself through the art, and then there are therapists sitting with him. So art therapy can be also given as an individual therapy as well as a group therapy. So it is equally powerful in both kinds of settings. And not only as a therapy, in general, if any one of us do any kind of art, it has a therapeutic value because it helps us, to gather ourselves. Then I will also talk a little bit about dance therapy. So when we are doing any kind of dance, let it be classical or modern or pop or whatever kind of dance we are doing, what we are actually doing is like we are moving our bodies, and the instructor helps us, to keep our minds in our bodies when we are moving around. Normally, we are at one place, like our body is at one place and our mind is wandering here and there. But in the dance therapy, they try to bring us into a present moment. So when our body and our mind is together, so it is like, for example, yoga. What we do is that yoga is, comes from the word yuja. Yuja is to join, so to join mind and body. So same thing is done in the dance therapy, is that where you join the mind and body with a creative expression. And then, as we all know, music. So most of us are music lovers, and music often helps us, releasing the stress. It makes us feel good. It relaxes us. It gives us a mental peace. But that is like, these are the general qualities of music. But when it is used as a therapy, then the therapist kind of prescribe you that you listen to this kind of music when you are in this kind of mood. So I guess that's a very effective kind of therapy that can be used, and people are using it. This is like especially like Indian classical music picture, for example, because like we have the music designed based on different kinds of emotions, and like I don't know whether you are aware of it, but we have these different kinds of ragas that are sung in different times of the day, and it creates that kind of effect. So for example, if you listen to Rag Malkams, then you try, you started feeling sleepy because this is the raga for relaxation. So normally it is kind of prescribed to the people who have restless kind of, insomnia, or they can't sleep well, or they are kind of restless during the night. So it is for to, relax them. So this is just an example. Or then there are some other ragas like Vrindavani Sarang or Rag Pillu that makes you feel, kind of delighted, glad, so that you feel happy. So this is kind of music therapy, which is again very much related to creativity. Then I would like you to think about, like, why do we lose our internal peace? So why this picture here is normally that the clock is always ticking in the present, but we are often either into the past or into the present. So we are often thinking about the things, the sorrows of the past, the guilts that we are carrying from the past, or then we are worried about the future. That, okay, what will happen to my business? What will happen to my career? What do I need to move from Finland to somewhere else? Or how my kids will do in their exams. So we are often worried about the future, or we are regretful about our past. So this is something that creates the internal conflict. And that's why we kind of lose our internal peace. And then we are in search of the mental peace, that, okay, from somewhere I need to get the mental peace. And then we try to do different kinds of things, as I already explained, like the therapies. So how does the creative art expression help to regain the peace? So first thing is that all these therapies and otherwise also any kind of creative art expression, these are the tools where we like to express our emotions, our state of mind. Like, for example, if when I'm very happy and excited, I try to use bright colors to show my happiness. And when I'm at peace of mind, I try to use the cold colors like green, blue. So these kinds of colors I will use. So I am expressing whatever I'm thinking and whatever my emotions are when I'm using it as a tool. And similarly, the dance and also the music, we try to express our emotions. So if we are happy, we will sing very good and happy songs. When we are sad, we are missing somebody, then we will listen to those kinds of songs and music. So that kinds of create our mood, and our mood kind of express through the creative art. Then it also makes us aware about our psychological state when we are going through any kind of therapeutic sessions, any kind of art therapy or music therapy. The therapist kind of makes us aware about what is our psychological state, what is our mood, what are we thinking. Sometimes in like overtly we are like very happy and satisfied, etc. But internally we have some stress, and that we don't understand otherwise. So these therapists help us in understanding these things. Then third thing is about the mindful actions, which I already explained, like in the dance moves, and being in the present moment. So whenever I'm drawing at this moment. So I'm very much into this moment, in the present moment, and I'm trying to express myself. These inner feelings of stress, fear, anxiety expressed in a beautiful way. So because we often think about, like, if the scientist is creative, is the terrorist also creative? It's a topic of debate. So creativity can be used for construction and also destruction. So we are looking for the positive creative use. And that's why these arts are way more important than just as a hobby. And then, of course, it helps us releasing the pressure. I have written a kind of a philosophical thing from the Hindu texts, and you might be aware of this or not, but in the scriptures, we believe that if we need to live a fulfilling life, we need to have these kinds of three aspects. So first is like Mahasaraswati, that is the knowledge aspect that we need to have. And then the Mahakali, that's like bravery or courage. And third is the Mahalakshmi, and that is the aesthetics. So without aesthetics, our life cannot be, fulfilling life. So we often give more importance to knowledge and courage, but we often forget the aesthetics. So that's why I mentioned these points here. Then individual creativity for internal peace. So these are actually positively correlated. So if we express ourselves, express our individual creativity, that means we are more peaceful. We are working towards our peace. And this individual creativity is actually your own expression for yourself. So scientifically, there are 4 C's of creativity, like the mini C, little c, pro C, and big C. But normally, whenever we are doing something just for our own joy, then it can be termed as a mini C and a little c. So little c is like when you draw or paint or cook, bake or sew, write creative text, maybe a poem or a prose, then you are expressing your little c. And then whenever you are doing any kind of expression, your brain is totally active. And not only like your brain is active, but mainly it is like your analytical and creative intelligence is working simultaneously. So it's like your left brain and right brain working at the same time. And this positive brain activation and engagement helps the healing, because then you are focusing on that activity, whatever you are doing at that moment, and that process is a healing process, and that leads you to the internal peace. So I will show you quickly this diagram like this. This is the brain, left brain and right brain. As you can see, the left brain is working more for the data analysis kinds of things, and then the right brain is more about the emotions and the creativity and the expression. So whenever we are doing something that of our interest, all this is combined and working together. So in current research, it's not like shown that there is a left and right are working, but we have understood that it's working together. But just for our understanding, I have put that there are these kinds of centers, and then we start working together whenever we are creatively expressing ourselves. Let's try to see some examples. So this is an example of collective creativity. So what is collective creativity actually? So as you can see, there are people coming together to create something. Okay, this is from one of our conferences. So at Council for Creative Education, we host annual conference about to celebrate World Creativity and Innovation Day. So this is from that conference that people are coming together and they are creating something. When we started doing this, we were not sure that what will be the result, and we were even not worried about what is going to be the result, because we were enjoying the process of coming together, creating together. So let's see what's the result. So this is the result of the collective creativity. So we created something very beautiful, and which we were not sure of that what is coming out. So this is the result. And then there are some other examples of collective creativity, like mandal art. We all might be aware of this from the mindfulness practice. So this is also can be individual creativity as well as collective creativity. So one person can do it and many people can come together and do it. There is one more example, and this is called Rangoli. And this is also an example of individual creativity as well as collective creativity. So in most of Indian households, we have this practice of drawing this beautiful Rangoli in front of our front doors. And so in many places, it's like people will draw, like generally the women, they will draw a small piece of art in front of their doors. And normally it won't be any kind of abstract drawing, but it will be a pattern drawing. So there is always some kind of geometrical patterns will be involved in this kind of drawing. And then this, the picture that you are seeing, it's a kind of a collective creativity. So some 3, 4, 5 women come together and made this big drawing, big Rangoli. So, and one more thing which I would like to mention here, that is also, which is also related to the peace of mind. And this Rangoli, you create once and then you destroy it the next day, it is gone. So it also teaches you not to hold upon things, but let it go. And then you create something new next time. I guess this is the best thing to learn from these kind of activities, that you cannot hold the things. Even the picture that we created collectively in our conference, we threw everything. Because when I was discussing with the teacher who kind of took us through this process, so I asked her what to do with these pictures. So she said, you have to throw these pictures because then you have a room to create something new. So I guess this is a rocking thought, that for any kind of internal peace, why we lose our peace is sometimes because we are not ready to let it go. So I guess these kind of things also teach us that however beautiful you draw the Rangoli, it has to go. It will vanish. So I guess this is also one of the good messages that we can have it from this. So in total, like what can be the benefits of the collective creativity? So I was discussing with the participants after they made their paintings in our conference. So, and then I could found some of these points from those discussions. So first thing they mentioned, that they were really feeling good about being a part of a community, because let me tell you, these people, they were from 40 different countries coming together for the conference. So they never knew each other. They were not friends. And we tried to kind of, make groups in which not people from same organization or same universities are together, but we tried to mix and match. So this was like their first response, that feeling good about being a part of community. Then there was a positive engagement with the community, leading to positive self-image, because some of them, they expressed that, okay, I never tried this kind of painting with my fingers earlier. So, but because others were doing, I was inspired to do it. And then kind of this positive self-image is it always plays a very crucial role in our personality development and all our communication and everything that we do. This positive self-image is vital. It also enhanced their collaboration, that they tried to understand each other's style, the thinking, and whether they are reluctant or whether they are open. So it kind of enhanced their collaboration because they could understand each other better through these artistic expressions. Because I saw in the earlier drawing which I showed you, that then some people use their hands very frequently and very openly, and some of the people, they were just using their tip of the fingers to put it on the paper. So they were not ready to open, they were not ready to experiment, to explore something new. So this kind of shows their personality, that they are like in their cocoon and they don't want to break that. So that is also so that also helped them in understanding the similarities and differences. So two people working together, how similar they are and how different they are from each other. And then respecting each other's arts and viewpoints. So if I'm not ready to use my full hand, then my partner or my team members kind of accepted it. that, okay, this person is not ready to use the hand. But then they kind of encouraged me to at least use the tip of my fingers, or then they encouraged me to at least put the paint on their hands, something like that. So they tried to involve me in the activity. And this kind of, this creating something together leads to collective ownership. So I often give this example of collective ownership, like for in the school, if you go and you ask the students that this wall belongs to you and you have to take care of this wall. So then they will try to decorate it, they will try to put some of their art there, and then they will also take care of that wall and take care of that art because it is created by them. So that's why this collective ownership is very important, considering any kind of community activity, because then they have this. If you just put rules that, okay, these are the walls and those should be clean, then people are always interested in breaking the rules. But if you give them the ownership, then they will form the rules themselves and then they will obey the rules. And I guess, oh, what happened? I'm missing one of the slides. Yes, this was my last slide. So what we can do to nurture this creativity as a life skill? So I say cheese. So what does that mean? So C is for challenge. So you have to challenge your creativity on daily basis. So you have to think, okay, what's something new I can do today? And you have to encourage yourself to explore that, okay, let me try this, let me try drawing, let me try painting, let me try the garden work, something that you haven't tried earlier. So encourage yourself, engage into meaningful activities. So like, for example, this World Intellectual Forum. So we all are engaged in some kind of meaningful activity. So we have to find out, okay, what is a meaningful activity for myself? Maybe something that is meaningful for Dr. Thomas may not be meaningful for me. So I have to find my own meaningful activity. And I need to also surprise myself, because then my brain gets that excitement that, okay, this is something I have never seen earlier. This is something I have never tried earlier. So that surprise element is important. And then the exercise, because I often tell that I know that there is a person who is talking about neuroscience like Dr. Arun, but in my little knowledge, I will tell that we have this, we need this dopamine hormone, and which is also known as a happiness hormone, and it releases when we do some kind of physical exercise. So that's why this exercising also very important if we want to nurture our creativity. So if I have some time, I would like to show you one very beautiful video about a project in US. So it is about, I guess, 3 minutes video. So do we have time? Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So by that time, if you want, some of you want to comment on something, that time might play the video. I will just stop sharing for a moment.
Whilst we're waiting for the video, let's just begin the discussion if we can. Is there a problem technically, Shirin, or are you going to?
No, I got it already. I will be playing it just a moment.
Okay. Fascinating presentation. Thank you for that. let's see what the video has. And then we'll have any questions, discussion, and so on.
Yeah, sure. Is it audible?
No, we can't hear anything.
Okay, just a moment.
We can see.
Yeah. Because I guess I need to give it the permission for sharing the audio as well. Yeah, share sound. And now I will put it again. Can you hear it now?
Yes, that's fine.
So this is a project where they are using the military uniforms of the veterans, and this is a process of taking them out of stress. I will explain a bit later. So this is a project actually, and it is called Combat Paper Project. So this is, I will also put the link of that in our chat box so that you can go and look at it, at what they do and how they do it. But I found it really fascinating, the way they transform those uniforms into the papers. It's wonderful.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, well, thank you, Shirin, for your moving comments about creativity. I'm a poet as well and a musician, so I've always loved the arts. The arts are very important, and I'm also, aware that schools are shutting down art departments. Drama, theatre is seen as. I used to be in the theatre, youth theatre in Brighton, where I grew up in Sussex. To me, every child should have the chance to practice theatre, drawing, painting, music. And yet our system, our leaders, to use that dreadful word that Robert once banned in education, are saying, no, it doesn't matter, science, maths, etc. So my first question to you is, how do we fight back? How do we get creativity in the curriculum to be realized as so important? When officials, the system, tell us it's not important. There's a kind of intellectual war going on, isn't there? So how do we, as the World Intellectual Forum, help that? How do we let the creative people win? Big question. You'll have to unmute, Shirin, if you want to tackle that one.
Yeah, actually, through our organization, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to train the teachers for being creative themselves, so that then they can, and then we want to make them aware about creative pedagogy. Like, for example, using the art music, and body movements as a pedagogy, so that they can teach mathematics, science through these things. So then they will understand the importance of it, because nowadays it is not important to give the information to the students. It's available. It's available on a click, and the information is everywhere practically. So they don't need to get the information from the teachers. They need the teachers to make them understand that what they will do with that information, how they will comprehend, how they will analyze, and how they will create their own knowledge on the basis of that information. So for that reason, the teachers need to be more engaging and more active as a facilitator, not as a teacher. And to facilitate, they need tools. And these are the tools: art, drawing, drama. These are the tools. So like, for example, I work also on this kind of narrative teaching techniques, like storytelling, dramatization, role play. So then I tell them that how can you tell stories in science, for example. So like I gave one presentation in this India International Science Festival, and I was invited there to talk about using storytelling as a tool in teaching science in schools. So there I told them, like, these are a couple of points. That first thing is, there are already stories existing about different kinds of discoveries. The very famous story is James Watt. So his story of this steam engine. So we have to collect these kinds of stories. So students find these kind of classes engaging, because everybody likes listening to stories. So this combat paper we just saw is a story we were watching together. So that's how we try to encourage the teachers to imbibe this creativity into the curriculum. And I guess it's possible. If it is done in this way, it's possible. If we simply tell people that drama is important, theater is important, art is important, then they don't understand. But if you teach them how to use it for mathematics, for science, then they are on for it. So
Sure.
that's my experience.
That's a very important observation. I mean, just a quick comment and then over to someone else. I worked as a teacher in the UK for 10 years. I found there's an obsession in the UK education system with the god of education is the lesson plan. You can't go into a classroom nowadays unless you've already said what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, almost down to the minute. And you're examined as a teacher, not on your class so much as on your lesson plans. And I find, because I'm a creative individual, a really good lesson may go off in different directions. It will always have a spontaneity about it. Surely creativity has spontaneity. And yet this tyranny of the lesson plan means that everything has to be preordained, which to me kills the joy of teaching and learning. So I just wondered, in Finland, I know you're famous, you have a creative curriculum. Have you abolished the dreaded lesson plan, or does it still rule? And if so, how do you get around that?
Good question. So fortunately, the teachers are considered as pedagogical leaders in Finland. So nobody inspect them, like what they are doing and how they are doing, and no lesson plans. Like they have to make lesson plans maybe for themselves, but they are not supposed to submit it to somebody, or they are not supposed to get any approval for it. So like, because I am also working as a teacher here now, so I know it even more better, that the principal is least bothered me if I'm in the school or not. If I'm not going to the school, I just need to inform them well in advance that, okay, that because of these things, I'm unable to come. And then I need to send them the plan or the activities, because I'm not there. But if I'm there, then I can plan it the way I want. The only important thing is that I need to follow the curriculum guidelines, and I need to follow the city's curriculum. till the time I'm doing it, no objections from anybody and no inspections. So we are
sounds like
in heaven.
paradise.
Yeah.
Like, can I move to
Yeah.
Finland? I want to come.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Robert, you told us in chat that Article 27 covers these. Is there a right to creativity? What's Article 27?
There are a number of rights to creativity, but Article 27 says everyone has the human right to participate freely in the cultural life and to share in scientific progress, as well as to the protection of their artistic, literary, and scientific creations. But there are any numbers. But I think that it is correct that teachers today have to be more inspirational. They have to encourage their students to want to learn and want to become lifelong learners rather than anything else. But it's also important that when you're very young, that you learn how to investigate, that you learn how to study, that you learn how to use technology to get information, so that a teacher can go deep in one area with the students as they become excited about that area, but then they know and have the tools so that they can do the broad-based learning that's necessary. The conflict is that governments more and more, and we're seeing it in the United States now in particularly, want to limit what can be taught and how it can be taught.
Yeah.
And that is for political reasons, not for educational reasons, not for social or cultural reasons, but for political control. And once again, we go back to that same premise: what is government there for? And now government is proven again and again that it's there to protect itself and its own powers rather than see creativity. Creativity is a threat to structured strongman style government. And so you see arts being second guessed and pushed to the sidelines simply because there's ample evidence and certainly enough scientific research that shows that introducing the arts into an educational program expands the ability of students to learn and to learn in depth and to learn creative ways of solving problems and all of those things. If your government doesn't want that to happen, then people will do everything in their power to stop it.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Yes. Anyone else want to add a question or make a comment to Shirin's questions?
Hi, Thomas, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Gila, go for it.
Okay, so about 25 years I was teaching how to have creative thinking in private courses for business people and high-tech people. And there is a very famous writer, his name is De Bono.
Yeah.
And we were using his guidelines as how to develop creative thinking by developing creative thinking about concepts. For instance, you take a concept of a house, and I mean, normally you think a house as little children draw it, but then you have to add to it extra ideas, I would say, like wheels or other components, and then you transfer the concept of the house, you widen it to something more than the normal concept. And that's a way of training your mind to have a more creative thinking. Because even 25 years ago and more, it was already known that you need both sides of the brain. You need the logical side, and you need the creative side, which is more an intuitive one. And you have to be open to it. So there's a way to teach it, not only through drama. What she said, it's okay and I accept and it's important. But also if you think about science and people who are more mathematically or scientific oriented, you can also train their mind how to be more creative. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah. No, that's very good. Thank you very much, Gina. Shirin, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, certainly. Actually, of course, I know Edward de Bono and his six hat activities and everything. And a very valid point that I would like to say that in the organizations or in the business, creativity has already gained the importance, and it has been important for many years now. The problem is with the creativity in schools and creativity in education field. So we have to make people understand that it is needed, it is required. And as Geeta was saying, that it is not only about arts and drama and theater. So that's what we said, that it is the creativity lies in everything. So a person actually, whenever we are talking about creativity, we are talking about the out of box thinking, basically. So the out of box thinking can be anywhere. There is no limit for that. So it cannot be like only in one thing and not in the other thing. So out of box thinking, or what we call as divergent thinking, is what we are looking at or aiming at when we are thinking about nurturing the creativity or nurturing the creative thinking skills or creative problem solving skills. So we are talking about those things. And of course, I totally agree to it that we have to encourage it in all kinds of people and not only for the artists. And that has never been said that, but because I was talking about the therapies, I used more art, dance and music kind of thing. But there can be a maths therapy, why not? And there can be a science therapy, why not? So people have not thought of this earlier. Now we can think and we can make them understand that, okay, this is the way. This is also a therapeutic way that you treat your problem in this way, and then you express yourself in this way. So yeah, we
Brilliant.
should be open.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
So, Thomas, can I take 1 minute?
Dr. Mishra, go for it. Yeah.
Yes. Shirin, I had a question. It's more curiosity, I must say. As a scientist, I think the way you are telling the many diverse things you are presenting to the children, rather than really creativity. What do you think in terms of your training? What kind of children you are producing? How will you measure it? Have you any data that it has worked, that you have produced more subject inclined children, or maybe more peaceful children, or maybe highly developed personality children? What do you think is the outcome?
Yeah, very good question, Dr. Mishra. So far, we haven't done any research directly related to our trainings that we are providing. But I have done a research about comparing Indian school children with Finnish school children. And it's not a comparison about their Indianness or Finnishness, but it is more about their school environments that they are in. So what I found through my research, through the data, is that the kids who are in more open environment and encouraging environment, they are more creative, definitely. And then the kids, and then it can be like in Finland or India or anywhere in the world. So that doesn't really matter where they are, but it matters that. And then when I tried to find out the reasons for this, that why it is so, what are the factors that are leading to this kind of their creativity, then I found that they have got very good teachers who are exhibiting their own creativity in front of the children. And that's why they are getting the inspiration from their teachers, and they are also getting the environment which is more open and flexible, so that they can take certain decisions of where to study, what to study, when to study, these kind of things. And then they can choose the methods of studying in their ways. And then the pedagogical training also matters a lot when we talk about the teachers exhibiting their skills. So that also I found that when the teachers have received such a training where they are, they know like how to teach in different ways so that the audience is engaged. Again, I will like reiterate the same point that the education has to be very engaging. Most often, what we have done earlier is as to engage the students, we used to ask them to write a lot. So the teachers are coming and they are asking the students to write because that's what they thought is the most engaging activity and most educating activity. But that's not true. We all know repetitive writing has helped nobody. Maybe your handwriting will be good after writing so much, but it is not helping you in any kind of thinking or thought process or any kind of out of box thinking, not at all. So I guess we aim to have such kind of people in future. Those are open to new ideas, but at the same time they also have the analytical skills. So because simply having ideas also doesn't help you. You have to know how to execute those ideas. So why the scientists are great? Because they have the ideas and they also have the skills to execute the ideas. They do the experiments and then they prove whatever idea came to their mind is right or wrong, whatever. But they experiment, they execute. So all these skills are equally important, not only creativity.
Yeah. Well,
I
maybe
hope I answered.
One of the tasks I have as a scientist, how to attract talent for science career. My question was, can you design a program that can orient students to a particular kind of career, say arts or science or many other things? Maybe
Yeah,
social.
we can do that. That is not a problem because we have designed some programs mainly for the entrepreneurship. So this is also possible to kind of design a program which can lead them towards a certain faculty. At least we can show them the beauty and show them the challenges in that field, positive challenges, so that they can be more towards a particular field. That can be done because see, all things has to be in the environment. Yeah. Yes, please go on.
I just want to share with you, Shirin, that we have never been able to predict extraordinary minds at the school level. We have never been able to do. Einstein was very average, but turned out to be a super scientist. So my point was that with this kind of engagement, do we really create creativity in the mind of children, or it is diverse presentation to them to keep them engaged? My question is that. Creativity essentially means doing very novel thing. Let's say if you give the design Rangoli, can child make the Rangoli in another way? Can collectivity can be a different thing? A child can organize community collectivity in another way, novel way, which we are surprised to see. That's creativity. My point was that. Keep in mind, but we are looking for such things because I am engaged in orienting students to science career, and I conduct some programs. So I'm aware that what are the intricacies in this kind of things. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Maybe you two should get together later and design a way of measuring creativity. You know, I expect some people are working on that. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time here. It's been a fascinating discussion.
I had something else.
Gila, last comments. Yeah, go for it.
I think in order to develop a creative thinking with children, the concept that I don't know if to say is missing, but it was missing from our discussion, is to have self-confidence. if you give the child this non-judgmental atmosphere, then he can start expressing himself, because there's no right and wrong. And then he is more free to explore and to use his imagination in order to develop new ways of thinking or playing or looking upon things and so on. So if we want to combine it with the other talk, is that we have to, as a society, to facilitate this atmosphere of non-fear atmosphere, not judgmental atmosphere, loving atmosphere, which is in the basic of human rights as well. And when you give this non-judgmental atmosphere, then people can celebrate themselves, their uniqueness.
That's a very important point. No, Gila, thank you for that. Very important point. Let me just share an anecdote from my own family. I was talking to my daughter yesterday, a couple of days ago, about my grandson, her son. And we were talking about his education work. And she said, yes, he's good at art. Because I asked, is he good at art? Yes, he used to be really good at art. But then he saw a boy in his class who was much better than him. And then he self-judged that his art was worthless. And now he won't paint or draw anymore because he feels he's useless. And I think that's a brilliant illustration of what you're talking about, the competitiveness of our education system. It values winning and being best, becoming first. So my grandson now will never paint again because he's not the top.
And you, and
which
he lost
him all that creative outlet. So that's so what I think you raised a huge point. We have to get rid of this competitiveness at the root of our education.
Definitely, and just judgmental, yes.
Absolutely, it's a vignette. If we, I mean, it's a huge reformation we're talking about. If we replaced educational competitiveness, you know, rankings, tables, leagues, with creativity, in which you self-judge, like what mark do you give yourself for your creative
self-acceptance, I would say, instead of self-judge. Yes.
Self about, yeah. I mean, it's a huge
acceptance. Yeah.
Well, let's do it. You know, let's go away for. We'll come back next month, and let's all share our thinking on this one. Okay. This has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a few closing remarks. I'd like to thank our speakers, Robert and Shirin, for your stimulating thoughts. Do come back next month. We'll be here. There's always different speakers sharing. I just want to finish by saying that if you don't know, I'm part of the International Delphic Games movement. The Delphic Games were the parallel to the Olympic Games. And they took place every 4 years in ancient Greece for 1,000 years. I'm their educational outreach person. And actually, we're meeting. The International Delphic Academy is meeting today. I can't be at it because I'm here and there's another meeting. We're having a second half to this World Intellectual Forum gathering. We've got the Costa Rican ambassador to the UN speaking about Gandhi and the environment. We're having like an hour and a half break, and then there's part 2 in honor of Gandhi's birthday. But the Delphic Academy is trying to stimulate creativity in the arts worldwide. It's a program that I'll put the URL in chat. Its Secretary General lives in Berlin, but we have an international outreach. And anyone that wants to take these ideas further, the Delphic Games used to meet every 4 years. There was poetry, music, dance, theatre, sculpture. All, you know, Greek was a place of art as well as the sciences, philosophy, mathematics. And I think going to Robert's point about what are the politicians doing, to me, one of the great heroes of democracy was Pericles. And Pericles, the great Athenian statesman, gave an oration when he honored the dead who died fighting for the Athenian values. He said they don't need a tomb, they don't need a monument, because they were fighting for the arts, for culture, for literature, for philosophy, for everything that Athens stood for in its war against Sparta, which was about totalitarianism and fear. I don't know if you know, but Sparta ruled its society with a secret police called the Cryptia, which would go around arresting and killing people, hanging them from trees, the Cryptia.
Didn't know that.
And they're still, you know, so that's the kind of what we're up against. It's Athens versus Sparta, folks. And I think you know whose side I'm on. And Pericles was, you know, the spokesman for the value of culture and the arts against totalitarian militarism. It's the same old struggle. So join us in the Delphic Games. I'll maybe talk more about that next month.
Okay, okay.
And so any final thoughts? Shreya, you've been very quiet. Is your microphone working? I think Shreya's had a technical problem. Okay, so look, thank you again for everyone that's come. Ian, I know it's way past your bedtime, so it's about 2 in the morning there. So look, blessings upon you all and namaste. And oh, Robert, I wanted to say one thing, joining the two things. I'm also a pianist, a composer, and I discovered a work recently called The People United Shall Never Be Defeated. It's by an American pianist composer. It was variations on a Chilean folk song that was played at the time of Pablo Neruda, who's one of my great poet heroes. And it was a long piano piece. It's called the greatest piano piece of the 20th century, right? As you were talking, I thought, when I get my grand piano installed here in La Creuse, which is down the road from where Chopin lived, I'm going to write a set of variations on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's going to have 31 parts to it, and it'll be in the genre of The People United Shall Never Be Defeated. So that's my pledge as a pianist composer. I'm going to do that for you because that's an example of how we can bring the arts and creativity together with, you know, the tough question of getting across human rights knowledge and peace knowledge. Okay, so there we are. I just thought I'd share that. Thank you again, both Robert and Shirin, and everyone else for joining us, Dr. Mishra and everyone else, and Gila. Okay, shalom.
Bye-bye.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Very good idea. Vibrations through music.
Absolutely, that's the way to go, Gila.
Okay.
Yeah, come and visit. You're all welcome. I run a peace museum here in the middle of France. It's a center for the arts.
Do that. Thank you.
And culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Shirin, we'll stay in touch.
Yes, sure.
Namaste.